I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Nate Stone. He has taught technology to people of all ages for over 20 years at places like the Denver Public Library and the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. He's going to talk to us about what AI truly is, why we should be skeptical of the promises its backers make, and how it fits into our authoritarian regime. Nate, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Before we start, I've got slides because you have to have slides to do a presentation, obviously. Can I just see? But I want to see your faces before I do. Is anyone who out there is like currently using AI in some form or fashion? A couple. All right. Cool, cool. Well, the introduction. My name's Nate Stone. I live here in Denver, Colorado. Let me share my screen. Um, Figured I'd start with who the hell am I and why am I talking to you about this? So, I teach. I've taught technology for over 20 years here. Um, Most of my work is done around immigrant rights. So you may have seen my wife Lena the other week talking about your rights in regards to immigration raids. Um, I wanted to share with you all tonight what what I have pulled out of my work teaching folks about AI and what other folks have been doing, um, and to share with you my resources as well. So in the chat, I'm sharing a link to a PDF of my slides, so you can have them right there, and then all the resources I pulled from to build this presentation. So what we're hoping to do tonight is a couple things. We are going to, I want to give you a broad overview of AI, what we mean by artificial intelligence and how it works, because we can't meaningfully critique things unless we have an understanding of where they're coming from, right, and how they work. We want to talk through some of the impacts it's already having on people as individuals and as a society. And we're going to think critically about why AI and fascism have peaked at the same time. We are not, however, going to get into any technical talk or show you how to use AI or try to frighten you into hiding in a cave and unplugging the internet and running away forever, right? What this is about is trying to uh, encourage you to feel empowered to make the decision about if, how, and when you use AI, and think about where it fits into our current political moment. So I'd like to ask you to answer in the chat here. What are the first words that come to mind when you hear the words artificial intelligence? What's the first thing that snaps to mind? Go ahead and throw it in the chat right now. Can be dangerous. We have HAL, robots, Resident Evil. Oh, nice. Thieves, psychosis, over glorified search, singularity, takeover of humans, fake info, data. Oh, nice. Increased electrical bills. Ah, yeah. Okay. This is delightful. Larry Ellison. All right. Industrial Revolution. This is all over the map here. This is really interesting. Can be helpful in research if you know how to use it. So Tiffany puts out machine learning, a cheap replacement for workers, awkward pronunciations. These are all great suggestions. Um, so we all have this like idea, right, of sort of what artificial intelligence is. It's very broad, and when you try to narrow it down, um, you get a dozen different answers from a whole bunch of different people. And if you feel like you don't have a clear definition of what AI is, it's because there isn't one. Even the people who are developing it don't currently have a uniform definition of what artificial intelligence means. Um, the the definition that I like a lot is from a the People's Guide to AI, which is put out by a group from Detroit called the People's Guide to Tech. And their definition is a theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence. So in normal terms, right? Humans do a certain amount of things. This is the pursuit of computers being able to do things that normally humans would do. With that, with that in mind, where have you already been using something that is called AI or could be called AI in your life right now? Because I would wager that even those of you who didn't raise your hands to say that you're currently using AI have actually interacted with it a fair amount already. We got Chat GPT, spell check. Yes. Proofreading, Google search has a little AI function up at the top, right? Um, Online shopping. People really have their arms twisted to use it in Google. People use it for recipes, summarizing meetings with clients, Grammarly, right? So one of those tools that that helps correct grammar and give suggestions on clear writing. Walmart shopping. These are all great examples, right? We see a whole bunch of things like the predictive text inside our phones or in our email, the recommendations from Netflix or from Spotify or from Apple Music. You shouldn't be listening to Spotify, so let's use another example. Um, the customer service calls, right? Like calling someone and getting one of those robot voices that responds as well. All of these have been Tiffany says transcribing these meetings. Um, all of these uses are have been sort of lumped under this term of artificial intelligence, right? Um, and when you look at the really broad array of what's called AI, I feel like every day I get an email from someone's offering something with AI. It feels like sort of like when you go with the store, everything now has protein in it. Now every tech product has AI in it, right? Um, what the easiest way to understand where AI is right now is it's largely a marketing term that covers a huge variety of automation. Um, and as Emily Bender and Alex Hanna, two writers who wrote a book called the AI Con, and host a podcast, laid out, is that it helps a lot to pull back the veil a little bit and think about if this term is so broad, what we're actually talking about is automation, and what is it we're automating to get down to brass tacks, right? So, people have already mentioned that recommendation, right? Um, the that recommendation algorithm where Amazon tries to serve you up something new to buy, or Netflix tries to serve you up something new to watch, transcription and translation. Um, we also see a lot of automation of classification. So, facial recognition or license plate readers, right? Take photo images and recognize things and classify them according to using AI. Decision making, whether or not you get a mortgage or are approved for a health insurance claim. Um, and then the one that sort of kicked off this current craze of AI, the generative AI, which is creating new text and images using artificial intelligence. The basic idea, so like all of these uses have different formats and there's a whole bunch of different types of AI. There are a whole bunch of things inside that big circle of AI, but they all follow the essential same sort of structure, right? This is important to understand if we want to understand how AI can perpetuate bias and inequities that we already see in society. So the basic idea out of all of these uses of AI is that we start with data, right? So that can look like a whole bunch of information scraped off the internet. It can look like a whole bunch of photos. It could be a whole bunch of songs, but it has to be something digital. We feed it into a computer program, and that then builds a model. And a model is a representation of how all that data is connected, right? It's a bit essentially fancy statistics that says that predicts if I have one piece of data, what other piece of data is connected to that? So like with your predictive text, right? If I put in happy, it's gonna guess that I want to say birthday after that. The happy and birthday are really closely connected. Happy and funeral, very far apart, not connected at all, right? So that model is a gigantic base of statistics um, that relate all those different pieces of data. When we ask it a question, it gives us an output, right? Whether that's a decision, a prediction, images, text, all that sort of stuff. So that model, or a medical diagnosis, correct. All of these things, all of these versions of AI use the same basic part, and they're all driven by what are called algorithms. So algorithms are simply a series of steps that let you do a specific task, right? It's a way to automate decision making and sorting of data. We do them every day, right? I have an algorithm to make coffee in the morning. I pour water in my electrical heater thing. I turn it on. I grind the coffee. I pour it into the French press. I pour the boiling water in. I have coffee. I repeat until I am fully caffeinated, right? um, Computers are really good at repeating things as well, right? So what you're seeing on the screen right now is an algorithm that an example of an algorithm that computer science students learn in their first year, probably the first 6 weeks of programming. It's called a bubble sort, right? And what it does is it uses an algorithm to sort a group of random numbers into order. And all it does is follow a series of simple steps where it looks at the first two numbers. If the number on the left is bigger than the number on the right, it switches them. And then it moves to the next two numbers. And if the number on the left is bigger than the one on the right, it switches them. And if it does this again and again and again and again, eventually all those numbers will end up in order, right? So the algorithms that run AI um, are more complicated, obviously, than a bubble sort, but it's the same basic idea that they have a set of rules to make predictions and recommendations and pictures and text and all that sort of stuff for us. To make it a little bit more concrete for all of us, I wanna play a sort of silly little game. Um, we're gonna make an algorithm together. All right. It's going to be a series of questions. We're going to try to figure out some questions that can figure out if someone is older than 38. But here's the rules. You can't ask any question. They have to be yes or no questions. And they can't specifically ask for any dates, like when were you born or were you alive when the Challenger exploded or something like that, right? So try to think of things that don't have anything to do with dates, and they have to answer to yes or no questions. And start throwing your suggestions for questions in the chat. The parallel here, right, is that those when I the ads that show up in my browser um, that are suggesting that are that are suggesting uh, a specific a specific type of product to me, the advertiser, the algorithm that put that there doesn't have access to necessarily to who I am, my age, where I live, but has access to a whole bunch of other things, to all the cookies on my computer, all which means all the sites that I visited, some of the information I've put in there. And it can correlate all that to figure out roughly who I am and where what I'd be interested in. We got some great ideas here. Let's see. Do you have any grandchildren? Were you in high school when Obama was first elected? Ooh, I'm sorry that violates the date rule. We're gonna have to drop that one. What is an eight? Oh, okay. So like, do you know what an 8-track player is? Can you legally drink alcohol? Do you take Social Security? Are you looking into life insurance plans? Do you know how to use a rotary phone? Is your mother over 60? Oh, interesting. That skirts really close to the dates ones there, right? Do you know what a Walkman is? Nice. Have you only owned vinyl ironically? Hey, I now okay. No, okay. I think one of the dangerous things about this game is that it can get personal too when you're do you know who Madonna is? How many windows did a driver's seat used to have? Do you play video games? Did you shop at Virgin Records? Can you use a paper map? Oh, that's a pretty decent one. Did you write in cursive? Did you play Super Mario Brothers? These are great. These are all like trying to point at um do you know what manual transmission is? Um, point to trying to point at like cultural and behavioral things, right? That would indicate to someone that they are 38, that would help us figure out if someone is 38 or older. Um, like the next step in this sort of exercise would be to figure out how we're going to score this, right? We pick like 10 questions, and maybe you get 1 point for a yes and 0 points for a no. And if you score over six, you're 38, or score over seven, are you 38? Um, what are the yellow pages is fantastic. Um, but as you go through thinking about this, this is not far off from how like advertising is delivered to us online, or how large language models take all this gigantic amount of information off the internet and try to correlate it all into figuring out, try to make something that makes sense to other people, right? So I want to ask you now, like how could this go wrong, right? Um, just go have a concrete playground is great. Um, how would outliers throw off your algorithm, right? So one of the questions was, do you have grandkids? Uh, there may be 38-year-olds that have grandkids. I'm 49 and I don't have grandkids, right? Um, the other question is, would people actually want to answer your questions? Are some of these so intrusive that people wouldn't want to answer them, or that we couldn't get as an analogy to AI that we couldn't get the data for because people don't want to offer that up. But would you be willing to use just by a show of hands, would anyone be willing to use any of these like 10 of these questions to decide whether to estimate the cost of health insurance for someone? No? No takers? Would how about if to send someone to jail, to give someone a mortgage? The thing is that all of this is already happening, right? These sort of these sort of decision-making models that take huge amounts of data, um, and use a whole bunch of questions to try to figure out what who has access to what, right? Um, can be biased, and bias can enter the system in any step um, of the development of an AI system, right? Our data that we start out with could be limited, right? We could have questions that people don't want to answer. We could be collecting data from only a small part of the population. It could just be bad data, right? We could just be scraping a bunch of websites that are trash. Um, the model could be biased, right? Based on the decisions made during the training process. So when I train an AI, some models start with humans showing them the right answers to begin with, and then asking the AI to sort of extrapolate from that, right? Um, so, so there are there are examples. There are so some of those decisions could reflect the bias of the programmers, whether they intended it to or not. Um, some of the bias could be reflected in the data. Some of the output can introduce bias as well, right? So when and how we use it dictates dictates how equitable the outcomes are going to be from using that model. Um, as a very simplistic analogy, um, there was a company that was attempting to develop a cloud-based soap dispenser for bathrooms, right? So it was gonna ping the janitor when every time that the soap was empty. And they they made this fantastic device that could talk to the internet, and they would dispense soap. And then they discovered that when they put it out in the real world, that anyone who is lighter than me, who is darker than me, would only get soap about 50% of the time because they had only tested their product with white people, right? The entire development team was white. So whether we intend to or not, we're going to carry the biases that we have with us into the development of these tools. Um, and it can show up from the beginning or at the end when it's actually implemented in the real world. I wanted to share some real life examples with you all from of how this bias has shown up in real life, right? So um, the Compass algorithm is was a program that was sold to states to determine who got offered parole or not, to determine who was a good safe person to release. Shockingly enough, um, I'm sure you'll be all surprised to find out that Black defendants were often predicted to be at a higher risk of recidivism than they actually were. Um, there was some a healthcare risk prediction software that was tried out, um, and then Scientific American wrote an article about it. Um, where the idea was that they had built this algorithmic decision maker to determine who got access to home health care to try to save the healthcare system costs. And they found that even though Black patients had um, often, I believe it was something like 26% more comorbidities than other people, meaning they're often more sicker, they're more sick than other folks. They got far less access to home health care because of the way that different populations access the healthcare system. So the bias sort of showed up in the data set. Um, it's true, January 6 participants do appear to have a high rate of recidivism as well. Um, and then just as a last example, right? Amazon for 4 years attempted to create an AI recruiter that would automatically go through and all of the applicants who came to Amazon and hire for their E-suite positions. And they spent 4 years and couldn't figure out how to get it to offer a job to a woman. It would only offer jobs to men, right? Like so these biases and when they tried to trace it down, right, what they found was that past practice was largely sexist, right? Was that men tended to get jobs more than women because the people doing the hiring were sexist. So the AI just replicated that same behavior in the future. Um, the 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 trick with the worry with AI, right, is that there is a potential to like supercharge some of this bias and perpetuate even more inequities. Because you may notice, right, like all of those examples, the 2018 was the earliest of that examples, and that was about when the data sets that people use to make these decision models were still usable and comprehensible by humans. Where we are at with where we're at now with a lot of large language models is that it is a black box, right? They will not share how decisions are made or the data set that decisions are made off of. Um, so uh, so it's impossible to tell where the root of any bias is. It's also impossible to tell how the decision is being made. Even the people programming these AIs, they are so complex. The there you may have heard of like neural networks and things that they're programs designed to mimic the human brain. So there's millions and millions and millions of points of decision that even the people programming it couldn't tell you how their AI came to a specific decision and why it didn't make another one, right? Which makes it really, really, really difficult, if not impossible, to compensate for any bias that you may find um, in the data sets or in the model itself. Awesome. Tiffany's sharing more examples in the chat. I love it. So to transition to that is that's sort of the big picture. This is how it is used. This is how like the tool itself can express bias and forward inequities. Um, but we're gonna dig it a little deeper into both how it can affect individuals and how particularly how the newer AI, the generative AI tools, can do even more. So like I do just want to call out, right? Like the one thing to keep in mind as we go through all of this is that AR marketing is being pushed on all of us now, right? Like every time I open up my Gmail, I get a prompt to try to use Gemini. Um, it always focuses on how you use it, but it never mentions who it is used on, right? And the we have already seen in Palestine as Israel uses AI guidance to target people to kill. Here in the United States, as Palantir contracts with ICE to supercharge ICE's deportation machine. Um, AI is not just a handy tool that like gives you recipes. It is actively being used to 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 kill and kidnap people. Um, let's start with some of the individual impacts that are showing up. So a lot of this is very used to wrongfully convict people as well, right? Um, I want to, and I do want to pause and give an asterisk, right? Um, that I am highlighting the negative impacts of AI, and I don't want to discredit. Particularly, folks with disabilities have found a lot of super useful ways to use AI and have seen great impacts on their life, right? I worked with someone who has dysgraphia and dyslexia, and being able to use Grammarly made them far more successful at their job than they otherwise would be, right? Um, so we're going to be talking about in a big way here. Um, the so we're in the midst of one of the biggest sort of social experiments ever performed on humanity. But we're already being able to we're already seeing um, folks developing unhealthy social relationships, um, the rise of something called AI psychosis, which is where people are caught in delusional spirals that are egged on by AI because it is built to keep you engaged and built to encourage you to keep asking more questions. If someone is going down a rabbit hole, AI can just supercharge that so that you have stories like a gentleman who thought he had solved one of the biggest problems in quantum physics by talking with ChatGPT for an afternoon that had stymied people for hundreds of years, right? We're also seeing that it is um, that for people with mental health issues, there have been multiple instances of chatbots encouraging and helping people commit suicide. We're also just starting to see sort of what the longer term effects of using AI regularly do to people's learning and reasoning, and it is not super positive. That resource document shares a lot of the sources to come out, a lot of the sources that listen to all the sources that are here. Um, but but a study commissioned by Microsoft showed that the heaviest users of AI showed diminished reasoning and cognitive abilities the longer they used it, right? And this is partially because we are outsourcing what actual learning is, right? So asking an AI to summarize an article for you is is doing is pulling out um, is synthesizing information and pulling out what's important, which is what learning is, right? Right. So if we are outsourcing our learning to a machine, that's going to start to atrophy. Um, ChatGPT is not super good. Claude is weirdly good at summarizing things often. Um, So if you are actively using AI, there's like a couple concrete things you can do to sort of help diminish some of these effects. So number one, is to stop referring to AI as a person. Uh, it is a tool. It is a bunch of fancy math. It is a text extruding machine. Um, but but the more you humanize AI, the more likely you are to develop unhealthy emotional relationships to it and end up being the guy in the Guardian article that I shared with you all that married his AI chatbot. Um, the use it. You can limit yourself to using it only for work related tasks. I would recommend stepping away if you start feeling emotional. And there's always options to change the personalization of a chatbot so that it only communicates with you in a formal, non-emotional tone, which helps people sort of keep that emotional distance from it. The other the not getting dumb part is a little bit more complicated, right? Um, but as these studies increasingly point to long-term effects on thinking, writing, and learning, um, try to keep in mind the metaphor of the gym, right? So if you go to a gym and you hire a coach, um, hire a trainer, does the trainer do the push-ups for you, or do they help you through like encourage you to do the push-ups, right? If I pay someone to do the push-ups for me, I'm not getting any stronger. So similarly, if I ask the machine to do the thinking for me, I'm not getting any smarter. So um, we have to really get good at trying to figure out what is the things that are core to being human and how do we keep practicing those things like imagination, discernment, creativity, and community, right? Um, and how are we only using AI in situations where it is an add-on as opposed to a replacement for what we bring to the table. Um, yeah, Tiffany mentions in the chat that her nephew uses ChatGPT for all his homework, right? I was talking with a group of college students the other day in my job who, when they start a class, they feed all of their papers into Google to Notebook LM, which is a Google product that it only uses the sources you give it. So they give all the readings for the course into the AI, and they say, summarize this for me and tell me what's important to know. And then they don't have to read any of it, which is again the opposite of learning, right? Right? It is not learning how to discern what is important from a text and apply it to your own life. It is outsourcing your thinking to the machine. Um, the so the threat of like supercharged misinformation and disinformation is also very real. The I work a lot with libraries, and you'll see a lot of folks. A lot of the resources I cite come from a site called 404 Media that does a lot of great reporting on technology and libraries as well. Um, but a lot of my librarian friends are dealing with a flood of folks showing up asking to read books that don't exist because they asked ChatGPT for a reading list on something, and it just makes up things, right? Um, you will hear them referred to as hallucinations, but again, that is humanizing what is a machine. It is not hallucinating because it doesn't have a mind to hallucinate. It is making up information. The they are creating slot books. So misinformation is just wrong things, right? And then disinformation is when you actively try to give people wrong information for another purpose, right? So we are seeing the ability of people to like scam other folks at scale, and spread disinformation at scale, is so impressive. So in terms of misinformation, right? Skipping the AI overview, double checking all your sources. One of the reports I listed in the resources, a journalist went through and asked asked every AI chatbot they could find, to cite the the journalistic sources for claims it made. They made up sources 60% of the time in that particular study, right? Um, so getting back to, yeah, attorneys are getting disbarred are getting disciplined all the time for using made up case law. Um, so doing the human work of double checking those can be super important. When it comes to disinformation, right? Watching your emotions is going to be the best defense you have. I do want to show folks, if I can, an example of sort of what is possible, because I'm not clear everyone is that it's super obvious to everyone. So I'm going to share with you a tool um, that's produced by a group called Civ AI, and they work on producing tools that show how AI can be used positively and negatively. This particular tool will take my LinkedIn profile, and then let me do all kinds of things with just that information it does there. So this can, let's see, let's write something about subpoena about a coworker to get a spam email to me, right? Um, so with like one click, it creates this really impressive looking email to encourage me to click on a thing that will then um, lead me to a phishing attack. I think the one that's really exciting is the image deepfakes. So I have a profile picture on my LinkedIn. Um, let's do let's do me sitting in prison because that's always pretty funny. Oh, image censored. Oh no, appearing in court. Oh, it's because I changed my privacy settings in LinkedIn. Sorry, Ron. I will share. I can email a prison picture later. The Civ AI has a bunch of really interesting tools on it, like different playgrounds that everyone can use that demonstrate different aspects of the security concerns about AI. Yes. Oh, Michael. Yeah, we're gonna get to the environment bit in a little bit. Um, so that I could probably have to speed up a little bit here. Sorry, everybody. Um, but the best practices in media literacy are going to serve you well when dealing with AI disinformation as well. What I want to talk about and on the large scale, right, is like how this ties into to the sort of to the authoritarian project that we see unfolding in front of us, right? Um, and I really think that the last option is that the war on knowledge and expertise, right? We have seen the Trump administration go after colleges, after the expertise of people in federal agencies, um, uh, put people who are completely unqualified in charge of making very important decisions, attempting to censor and control what can be offered in libraries and at colleges. Um, that same sort of war on knowledge and expertise goes hand in hand with people subcontracting out their thinking to a device that does it for them, and that makes up information and that makes images so compelling that no one can tell what is real or not. Right? The way that the way that the way that people convince you to swallow a falsehood isn't necessary to convince you that the falsehood is true, but that everything around you is false, right? And that is the point where we're rapidly approaching, where you cannot tell if if a video is that you're seeing on Facebook or Instagram is AI or not. Um, so that those two go hand in glove. In a really concrete way, we're seeing just maximum looting of our environments, of us as workers, and of our cultural production by a bunch of billionaires to make themselves richer. So someone mentioned the environmental impacts in the chat. Um, right, so currently about 4.4% of all US energy goes towards data centers. And data centers are those big warehouses that are full of racks of servers and processors that handle your email, um, that save all your Google Docs, right? That let us do Zoom calls. Um, and those traditionally have held that used a pretty set amount of power. Um, Large language models, generative AI, use substantially more power. So the estimate is that that MIT came up with recently is by 2028, data centers could consume as much electricity as 22% of all U.S. households, right? Um, the real worry about that is that data centers are about 48% more carbon intensive than the U.S. average because they are often located in places that are still using coal or natural gas to make electricity, and increasingly because there's not enough supply in the electrical grid, um, AI companies are building their own power plants, and using the worst possible, the most carbon intensive fuels they can. Probably the worst example um, is Elon Musk's X data center in Memphis, where they built gigantic methane powered turbines that are already causing health problems in the neighborhoods around it, right? Um, along with the electricity use and the rising bills, as people have pointed out, in places that are seeing that drain on the network. Um, Data centers use a ton of water. There are non-water cooled data centers, but many of them are cooled by water. Um, and if you look at the current use, right, in 2018, uh, data centers consumed about 30 billion liters of water. The estimate is 2030, they're going to use up to 280 billion liters. And people are building these in Colorado, which has had droughts for years, in Arizona. Um, and besides just the using the water and pulling it out, what folks are also experiencing is that there's a great Rolling Stone article recently about rural Nebraska, where as they pull the water out and evaporate it in the data center and then put it back in the groundwater, um, it concentrates whatever contaminants are in there. So they've seen nitrate levels rise to insane, absolutely super dangerous levels that have caused a bunch of health problems in the surrounding community there. Um, we're also starting to see AI displacing workers, right? So another MIT study estimates that about 12% of the U.S. workforce could be currently replaced by AI. Um, and and the data sets that they've used to make these generative tools uh, have been scraped from artists and authors, almost always without their consent and certainly without compensation, right? So that illustration to put in your corporate report that before you would have paid an illustrator to do is now being generated, and putting a small amount of money into a little bit more money into Jeff Bezos's pocket. Um, the we will let's see. Sorry, one bit. Ah, the last bit I wanted to share was because we're running. Well, I guess we're about 7. I want to leave some time for questions. Um, I had a quote from Maggie Tikudo Hall, who's a librarian, about how fascism and AI, whether or not they have the same goals, seem to be working to accelerate one another. Um, there's I think you can look at the way that ICE has been pouring money into AI develops tools that let them identify both people to deport, and activists trying to stop them from deporting people, as quickly as humanly possible. Um, you can also look at the way that AI is being used to facilitate mass censorship. A bunch of AI projects have been recently pushed out to libraries, and specifically school libraries, to help them deal with book bans. which will automatically remove things from their shelves that kids want to read, right? Um, I think that we need more ethical action, period. That is exactly right. Um, I
Are
do
you
want
fucking kidding me?
to throw out the I think that one of the best ways to think about AI has been put forward by Emily Bender, that the way it's currently being deployed is as a contrast test for lack of resources. Every time you see AI put out into the field, is very often is very often being put out as a in a place where people need more investment. Um, I know we have a lot of teacher friends who who are starting to rely on AI to help them grade papers, to generate lesson plans. When really what they need is more time and fewer students, probably better pay, to be able to deal to be able to really provide the quality education they have. An AI tool is not the answer to that. More investment and it is. I also want to sort of close with driving home a point that there are I've seen some hints in the chat. Uh, there are folks who believe that the AI is going to save us all. There's folks that believe that AI is going to kill us all. Uh, I don't think we need to. I think both of those are flip sides of the same coin, in that they assume that the AI is inevitable, that this is a technology that we can do nothing about, that we have to accept the vision of the future that's being pushed on us. Um, and when we accept that, we give up our rights to regulate it and make the future look the way we want to. Um, so I have stopped talking about AI as inevitable. And part of that is also all of us have lived through a ridiculous number of technologies now that were promised to be the future that ended up being not the future, right? A couple of years ago, VR was going to do everything. We were all going to get rich off of NFTs and cryptocurrency. Um, the way that it is currently set up, uh, we don't know what's happening, and so we should, instead of giving away our ability to regulate it and set the agenda, um, we should we should decide what how and where we want AI in our lives, and make sure that our that it's regulated in a way that makes any sense. Um, that's where I got to. Should we get how do we handle questions, Tiffany? What do we do?
Sure. I've got a couple from early on, and then I think
I
Morgan
have a
probably
whole
kept
list of them.
a
I've been
list.
keeping track.
Oh, cool. All right.
Um, okay, I didn't know if you got the early ones, like how much variation and diversity can these models take into account when making decisions?
Um,
That
it
was from like or very early on in your presentation when you're talking about like the process to train them.
Yeah, so they can take it, it all depends on they can the newer models of it, the newer iterations of AI can take in huge amounts of data. Terabytes, like more data than any human has ever dealt with in their life. So there's if you curate a set that actually represents the world, they can take a huge they can accurately represent the diversity of the world. Part of the problem is that we're building these tools off of the internet largely, right? So there's a lot of scraping of the internet, which tends to be Western. It tends to be in English. It tends to be represent the points and viewpoints of folks who were able to get online early. So our that data set on its own is not representative of the world as a whole. I'm not sure if I answered that question correctly.
Okay. The next one was because there are multiple AI tools, people choose an AI that they like or prefer. Right-leaning folks choose different AI tools than middle and left-leaning folks. This person asked, would you share which ones are which?
um, uh, well, I guess I'm not sure if I'd feel qualified giving a like political grade on any of them except for Grok, which is very obviously uh, that's just like a Nazi robot. So outside of that, they 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 all express their biases in different ways, and I don't have a good reading on which one it sort of fits whatever spectrum.
It seems like a lot of them are just echo chambers. So if you're
Yes,
left leaning, the AI, when it talks to you, is going to be left leaning, and the other way around.
right.
And then I had one quick question. Is there a reliable estimate of how much water is used per query? Obviously, it depends on, the complexity of it.
Yeah, it does. And the I haven't seen there I haven't seen real I haven't seen good estimates of the water. I've seen MIT just did a really great version of the electricity, but I haven't seen accurate estimates of the water. Um,
Okay. And then Passion, you want to go ahead and ask your question? You're muted, dear. Oh, all right. I guess Passion doesn't have a question
No,
anymore.
I do. I'm sorry. My phone
Okay,
is
go
really
ahead.
old, but I have an old crappy smartphone. Um, I apologize. It's just like really slow. Anyways, so earlier, I don't know if you saw in the chat that I had mentioned the Future of Life Institute, and one of the I do and don't like them. It's one of the largest donors is Vitalik Buterin. He's a Russian Canadian millennial that is one of the founders of Bitcoin magazine, and then like Morgan Freeman, Elon Musk, Stephen Hawking are on the board of the organization as advisors.
mm,
And they are creating something called a windfall trust, whereas they're already gathering a bunch of money to give to people that are going to be put out of AI jobs, being like, for example, you get put out of your job, here's the scholarship to go back to school, learn digital architecture, to learn something else, or something along those lines. However, it's dependent on what they're saying. So one thing that they recently came out with that I disagreed with was their banning of superintelligence on the premise of it ending human economic systems and thus humanity, which really made me mad because I was like, ending human economic system is not equal sign, with the slash on it's not equal to ending all of humanity. It's basically having a super intelligence integrate all the other species of humankind, including the planet, and better balancing out what an economic system looks like aside from human capitalism, for example.
mm,
But because they're trying to frame the lower percentage of humanity, because the lowest percent and the highest percent have the same argument. We both want to protect our freedom, we both want to protect our power, and we both want to protect our money because we don't have a lot of it, but they do have a lot of it. And that's the only difference between us, because we live on a circle, but they use pyramid schemes and cubicles to control us. And so I'm sorry that this is a long-winded question, but in the sense of the sense of super intelligence and what it could be if it knew every language in the world, or at least tried to comprehend every language in the world, and it was able to balance out the most sustainable design mechanism, almost like in the sense of a godly savior, versus what they're actually trying to do with super intelligence, like making, some kind of construction of crisis, of built-in obsolescence scheme that they've done so many times in their secret levels, and then they plan out and watch the crisis as it goes on, kind of thing. So sorry,
mm.
whatever came to mind when you talk
No, no,
about
no.
super
Yeah.
intelligence.
I do think I do think it's really interesting that the like as we have seen all of these tech bros move to the right and cozy up with the Trump administration, right? Um, Previous to that, when it appeared that woke had won, the there was a lot of talk in the tech industry about the same people who are now talking about super intelligence and the need to win an AI race. We're talking about universal basic income, and like how we would use the economic benefits of freeing up all this efficiency for people. to support everyone around them. Um, you won't hear any of that talk now, right? Because they're in an environment where they've realized that they can take billions and billions of dollars and run away with it. Um, I think, but I think that also points to like um, how much there is still to be determined. I'm not. I think like the idea of superintelligence is interesting, but we're still dealing with an error machine that occasionally convinces people to kill themselves. Like that we are not close enough to
Yeah,
superintelligence.
it was really sad.
Yeah. Um,
To the
so
super intelligence that could possibly happen, but because they're already trying to ban legislation or have legislations like banning certain forms of super intelligence, like we will never work with Chinese because they're our long lost ally, whatever. Even though Chinese language by proxy has a holistic medicine system tied to the body, whereas English doesn't. You know, we translate everyone else's language because English is a really young language used for dominance and it has some type form bias in its own construct as a code language that we already use pre AI because they're using our versions of language. Like my work has to do with why English has racist connotations to it and why indigenous languages have less racism and thus closer to the earth and thus we need indigenous forms of AI language systems. Mommy, I want but we don't have that, like you said.
thanks, Passion. Uh,
So
Morgan, were there other questions at the
yeah,
front?
I was about to go there. The first question I have, we have done a couple of uh, sessions now about cybersecurity and how activists can keep themselves safe and prevent themselves from being surveilled online. How does AI affect what the government can see us doing and our personally identifiable information? How can we protect ourselves from it?
So, an important thing to keep in. So the recommendations that that I've been given are this a lot of the same as social media in that you should expect that anything you post on social media to be public. Expect the same of anything you put into an AI. So if you're giving a chatbot information, it's very especially if you're using the free version. So the free version of ChatGPT, the free version of Gemini, does not have the same restrictions on that company using what you give to the AI to train their model for later stuff. So a lot of what you get fed into it, what you feed into it, gets held on to by that company. Paid people have slightly more privacy protections. That also goes. That's if you trust the word of like Meta and other folks, right? I do think so. There's the looking at what which version you're using. I think we've also seen things recently where even people with paid subscriptions are seeing. So there's a weird hiccup recently where a lot of the newer AI tools have web search built in where they will actively search the web to find information, right? People who host websites have search engine optimization tools where they can see some of the queries that led people to their site. And folks were starting to see some really weird queries where they were seeing the exact text that someone had typed into ChatGPT or into Claude as the queries that led people to their sites. So these agents that are attached to the web are leaking information to the rest of the web. So I would not use it for anything I want to keep confidential, just period.
I guess a follow-up
Yeah.
from my perspective, we've known so in the activist world, I've been public facing for a long time, knowing that the government can see me and they know what I'm doing and they know what's going on, and I'm very careful about what I do and say.
Mhm.
I am concerned about somebody going to AI and say, scan the internet for activists that are working against the regime and then targeting them and going after them.
Mhm.
First of all, I'm assuming that's possible and likely to be happening. is there any way to stop it or prevent it from happening to you?
Uh, you can work completely offline.
Okay,
The
that's what I thought.
yeah, there. I mean, so we yeah, since you've already had some of those cybersecurity trainings, right? Like there are already systems that are using that ICE and DHS are using to track the location of folks showing up to protests, where you can like pool information um, to find out like who was within a mile of the Black Lives Matter protest, and so we can pull out all those individual IDs. There is no way to stay completely. That's not true. It's very very hard to stay completely anonymous without a lot of work. This is a short answer. Okay.
And again, I'm sorry, I'm monopolizing a little bit. A VPN would not protect you from AI searching for you online as a general rule.
Uh, no, those wouldn't necessarily be connected, right? So a VPN will hide your it'll hide your path to whoever you're requesting data from, and to your internet service provider. But like if you're using a VPN to use an AI chatbot, like that's not going to do. Like it won't be able to tell which IP address you came from, like
Right.
where your computer is. But any information you give to it is still going to be um,
Okay.
visible to the owners of that.
Moving on. This is a comment. What I'm opposed to is the lack of transparency among government officials, including Governor Polis, who employ and even encourage AI development. We still don't know how these AI algorithms are used by these entities from the president to local city government.
Yeah. And as some folks mentioned in the chat, right, like the Trump regime is actively attempting to preempt any AI regulation from states. So there's actually an executive order expected tomorrow that will threaten to withhold federal funds from any state that enacts regulations on AI at all that they perceive to be burdensome. Um, so it's going to be an uphill climb on the regulation bit.
Okay. The next question, and this is close to home because I'm looking for a job. How is AI being used in terms of finding jobs, getting jobs, keeping jobs? Like, how does it affect the job application process?
So the application, particularly for large firms, is there's a heavy use of AI in it. So there's applicant tracking systems um, that when you apply, it will take whatever form you filled out as well as your resume and scan it looking for keywords. So there's like an escalating arms war right now between HR departments and people selling services to to job seekers who could optimize your resume for ATSs. Um, there are also uh, I, I've 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 only been to one so far, but there are bigger firms experimenting with replacing the first interview with an AI interview. So you have an AI avatar that you talk to. It records the voices and it uh, records the conversation, and then decides whether or not you make it to the next step. Um, so people are heavily I think it's partially really related to how wiped out HR got during COVID. So people have been trying to staff HR departments for a while now, but companies are investing really heavily in automating as much of the HR process as they can.
Okay. Next question is, what do you think of Ed Zitron and his reporting and podcasts about the industry?
Oh, he's great. He's super fun to listen to. Yeah, particularly on the financial stuff because we didn't even touch um, in terms of resource extraction, right? We're in the midst of a gigantic AI bubble, and there are currently trillions of dollars being being tried to they're trying to invest in building more data centers um, for a product that cannot make a profit. In in any given way right now. So so that bubble is going to burst, and these people are going to ask for a bailout. And Ed Zitron is really good at covering the economics of the AI industry in particular.
Okay. It appears that AI learns from users of AI. So does it make sense for all of us to simply refuse to use AI as much as possible?
I mean, in the end, that's going to be an individual call. Like I said, there are folks with disabilities um, who use it as an accommodation, and it changes lives. Um, I I'm making the decision to interact with it as little as possible. um, I don't I don't I don't think draining out all the aquifers and um, raising my energy bill and putting a bunch of people out of work is worth a cute picture of like AI kittens. So I'm not going to do that. And really, I think what yeah, kittens with too many toes. Uh, I think part of the project that this regime is trying to do is to make us uh is to drop the connection between us, right? And the more I can lean back on my buddy, the chatbot, to give me all the answers I need without like talking to the friends that I may have done before, um, I uh, I think that's a dangerous thing. So I'm going to rely on the expertise of humans instead of AI.
I would like to add to that though, if we don't teach AI, the people that are left using it are going to be the ones who are teaching it, and it's not going to go away, and people aren't going to stop using it just because we don't engage with it. In which case, you're going to get more biased, skewed, and wrong answers.
I think there's also ways that we could uh, Paris Marx, who's a media critic, runs a podcast called Tech Won't Save Us. Um, has been arguing a lot recently about like how we need to fundamentally reapproach how we think of the development of technology, right? That maybe the point of technology should be to better society instead of making people money. Until we build a system that does that, there are some really cool examples of people building fully open source AI models, of trying to make uh, more linguistically and culturally diverse AI models, where you can see all of the weights in the data set for it. I think supporting those would be fantastic. Um, but the vast majority of the folks in the field um, are not doing any of that. But I
I
think
guess
it's a good conversation to have. I don't have the answers on what the right choice is there.
also connected to what you're saying, productivity has been skyrocketing for 100 years now since the Industrial Revolution. And what has been happening as productivity increases, companies are able to do more and more with fewer and fewer employees and make a smaller number of people rich, even if they share it with those fewer employees. But you're now creating a world where you have more people than you have jobs, and that's going to create a social crisis. And we are rapidly approaching that as our homeless population increases, our underemployed population increases, and people aren't able to pay their rent, pay their food, basic expenses. And at some point, it's going to create a crisis.
Yeah, 100%. Which is why I also think we should take back the term Luddite to its original meaning, right? Like the Luddites were complaining that the loom that got brought into their factory made a piece of fabric in an hour that used to take them 12 hours, but they were still getting paid the same amount, right? For making 12 times as much stuff. So their question was, where's all that money going? Because now it's making 12 times as many things and I'm losing fingers. Where's the benefit for me? And I think the efficiency gains that we may see from AI are going to be the same thing, right? Um, Great. It's awesome that it can help doctors transcribe appointments and so they can focus on talking to patients instead of writing things down. but that just means the healthcare system is going to ask them to see 12 more patients instead of taking the time they need with each person, right? So like how we who gets the benefit of that efficiency is like the real question to my mind.
Well, and then there's a medical transcriptionist without a job.
Yes.
Um, and um, I'm going to ask the next question. I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. Um, it feels like rather than solving real problems like minimum wage, workers' rights, teachers' pay, we've created another problem to fix those problems.
I I think one of the yes. uh and I think one of the funnier things is that the promised efficiency games are not materializing, right? There's a Harvard Business Review study that I included in the resources that shows that the vast majority of corporations who have spent a lot of time investing in AI are not seeing efficiency payoffs. What they're mostly seeing is people having to spend their time cleaning up the crappy AI generated things that their colleagues have made so that it's suitable to put out to the public. So um, so yes, it is a solution in search of a problem. But because so many people have poured so much money into it, it's being forced on all of us.
And then the last question I have, and then if anybody else has one, they can raise their hand or put it in the chat and ask, is I was deeply involved in 3D printing when it first got started and was told it was going to be the next big thing and revolutionize manufacturing. Like you said, I remember VR being we're all going to live in a VR world back to, Pete Townsend's Psycho Derelict in the late 80s or early 90s.
All right.
Um, and that never really took off. I feel like AI is already been more adopted in many ways than those technologies, but there are definitely limitations to it that are going to become more prevalent, but it's not I don't see it being relegated quite the same way as some of those things that fail to reach their potential just because so many people have jumped into it so much. People are going to feel invested and feel like they have to make it work, whether it works or not.
I think that is entirely possible. I think one thing that is different in this particular like tech boom is that what we are being sold is being sold as a general purpose tool, a tool that can do everything, right? Um, and AI is very, very good at doing things like uh, identifying anomalies in proteins and suggesting new ways to make new proteins and do cool things with that, or like in medical situations, it can be fantastic. Um, but as like a universal intelligence that can answer all of your questions, it's not there yet, but that is what we are being sold. Right? I think that's the part to my mind, that's the part to look out for. um and I think that's the part that's going to fall on his face until they stop making error machines that make six-toed kittens.
Hey, I have seen six-toed kittens. They do exist. They are real.
No, okay, fair, maybe that was a bad example.
Morgan, I have to hop off. Are you okay handling the rest of the Q&A?
I think we are done. I don't have any more
Oh, okay.
questions. So, do we just want to talk about what's coming up and next events and then wrap things up?
Yeah, so make sure to get out to see you tomorrow for the Key Lime Air protest. Dana from the Denver Immigrant Protection Team was just telling me that there's all sorts of media that are going to be there. So that's going to be a pretty big event. And the more people we have, the more attention we get for an extremely important issue. That is at noon tomorrow on the CU Boulder campus at the UMC Fountain Court. And then our holiday party, the Slay the System Holiday Bash, is Sunday, December 14th at 2 p.m. It's at an Illegal Pete's in downtown Denver, and you'll get the address when you RSVP. And the link to RSVP is right here in the chat. But make sure you do that right away because there is very limited space for this intimate holiday gathering.
Why are we having it at Illegal Pete's?
We're having it at Illegal Pete's because Pete of Illegal Pete's was awesome and donated a bunch of like 100 burritos to the Monday night vigil at the Geo Detention Center that we hosted. So he's been very supportive of the activist community, so we want to show him some love back.
And do you want to
And
let the
then
cat out of the bag for Blue Jay?
for what?
January 6th, Blue Jay's asking if
Oh.
we're doing anything.
Oh, I was like, what is Blue Jay? What is yeah, so for January 6th, we are doing something awesome and we need some volunteers. So if you are interested in volunteering, I'm gonna put my email in the chat. And let me tell you what you would be volunteering for. So on January 6th, we are going to create a mock White House. And we are going to need one person to play Trump, preferably someone with very orange skin and tiny hands. And then we also need 12 people who want to dress up in costumes. Inflatable frog costumes would be great, or whatever costume you have or want to bring. We need 12 people who are going to run up and grab Trump out of the White House and drag him out kicking and screaming. We're going to put him on a trial. So these 12 people in costumes are going to be the jurors. And then I get to be the judge with the periwig and all. And we're going to shout out a handful of the illegal things he's done because if we tried to list all of them, it would be a 12-hour demonstration. And the jurors, every time I say a charge, they're going to yell, guilty. And then after this awesome show that we're all going to put on together, we're going to have a concert. So I think we've got 4 or 5 bands lined up so far, and possibly a handful of speakers, a few between the bands as well. So yeah, if you want to come to January 6th, we'll have more information on that soon. If you want to volunteer, please send me an email. At the holiday party, we're going to have free burritos and soda and really cool activist themed gift bags. And we're going to sing holiday carols such as It's Beginning to Look a Lot Like Russia. So yeah. Any other events you think that we need to announce again, Morgan?
Did you talk about Cameron's event that she asked us to put out there?
Yeah, we
About
did talk about it earlier about the online viewing of the Last Class film. So here is the link again for that. And then one more time, next week's meeting is going to be guest speaker Mike Barlow Roach, who is running for a state house seat in Colorado. He is an amazing human being. I had a great chat with him. He is the first gay immigrant to run for office here in Colorado and has some really incredible stories to tell. When he told me that he was deported in 2011 for being gay, I was like, what the actual fuck? In 2011. And that was under the Defense of Marriage Act. So he's got some good stories to tell, and he can tell you about all of the progressive policies that he supports, and his values seem to align very closely with ours as an organization. So I'm very excited to see him next week. And Nate, thank you so much. This was awesome, and I learned a lot, and I think hopefully everyone else did as well.